Good evening. My name is Candace Dodson-Reed, and I am honored to serve on the board of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, and I am equally as excited to serve as your moderator today for what I am certain will be an informative discussion with Jean Karpinski, President of the League of Conservation Voters. I am pleased to have Kim Coble, Maryland's LCV's Executive Director, join us today as well. Jean Karpinski took over LCV nearly 15 years ago, and under his leadership, LCV has played a lead role in the environmental community's efforts to pass clean energy and climate policies and advance racial justice and equity as a core value. He has served on a number of national boards, including America Votes, Earth Share, the Partnership Project, the Belden Fund, and the National Association for Public Interest Law. Jean is a graduate of Brown University and Georgetown University Law Center. Kim Coble joined Maryland LCV last year after 2 years as the Chief Operating Officer at a small nonprofit in DC that promotes sustainable investing. Prior to that, Kim worked at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, where she oversaw CBF's policy, outreach, and restoration work throughout the watershed. Kim was selected as one of Maryland's top 100 women in 2015, appointed as an Admiral of the Chesapeake Bay, served as the valedictorian of her Leadership Maryland class, and was a member of the State Ethics Commission from 2015 to 2019. Welcome to the webinar, and thank you so much for joining us. Kim?
Thank you, Candace, and let me give a personal welcome and thank you to Jean for joining us tonight. I want to thank all of you who are watching tonight for what I am certain will be both informative and, knowing Jean, a fun discussion. For those of you that aren't familiar with us, Maryland LCV is the political voice for the environment in Maryland. We are an independent 501c4 organization that engages in legislative and political action, and we work hard to hold our elected officials accountable. We collaborate with National LCV, where Jean serves as president, and 30 other state leagues around the country. And collectively, we are all part of what we call the conservation voter movement. We work together to halt climate change, protect our land and water, secure voting rights, and help address racial equity and justice issues. I want to emphasize that there has never been a more important time to work at the nexus of politics and the environment, and that is exactly what we do at Maryland LCV. When you support our work, and we want to encourage you to support our work, your donation helps us to work on what we are calling the 3 E's in Maryland. Maryland LCV is addressing our state's most pressing environmental issues with a strategic and synergistic focus on environment, elections, and equity. And tonight's webinar, we are going to be focusing on the elections portion of the circle. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Candace, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kim. For tonight's webinar, Jean will provide his overview of where things stand on the 2020 election. After his presentation, I will ask a few questions of both Jean and Kim related to national and state environmental challenges and opportunities. We encourage audience participation and questions, and we ask that you please submit them in the Q&A area at the bottom of your screen. Jean, we'll get started with you. Welcome.
Great, Candace. Great to see you. Great to be here. Kim, thanks for your leadership, and a lot more work to come. Thanks, folks, for joining. And the nexus between the environment, elections, and equity, as you head up there, Kim, they're all connected, as we know. So we'll spend time talking about elections a bit tonight, and happy to take questions on that and many other things. But again, for elections for us and for the larger conservation voter movement, elections are a key strategy to win policies that have equity at the center. So environmental elections, environmental policies, environmental equity all go together. We'll spend time talking about the elections, but they're interwoven in all the ways and what we strive for. So I'm going to reflect a little bit about the state of the races, and then maybe even hypothesize what happens if actually we win a new White House champion and a new Senate leadership, and what that might bring us. and then have plenty of time for a conversation afterwards. So let's put up the first slide for a second. So yes, it's 28 days. That's 4 weeks to go to what I've been saying for actually a couple of years, the most important election of my lifetime, and probably for most of your all's lifetime as well. And that was always true because Trump is the most anti-environmental president in history. But over the course of this year, it got even more true. His tragic mishandling of the coronavirus, his stoking of racial bias in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, his handling of the Supreme Court next nominee, all these things made what was the most important election of our lifetime more important than ever. So here we are, 4 weeks to go. Feels like an eternity. Literally the last 8 days, so many things happened, it felt like a month. But before we go into any more detail, stop for 1 second, pause, and think of where you were on November 8th, 2016. Yes, indeed, that was election night of 2016. I'm sure you remember where you were, and that was the night that we, almost all of us, I certainly was, shocked, surprised, angry, dismayed that Trump had become elected. It was a horrible feeling. We woke up that next morning thinking it was just, hoping it was just a nightmare, but no, it was the new reality. And that moment and that feeling has stuck with me ever since. So with 4 weeks to go, we cannot wake up on November 4th, and hopefully with no results by then, and have that same kind of feeling. So we're all in to make sure we have a different result and not the feeling we had 4 years ago. And in fact, we've actually put together our biggest campaign ever. We will invest over $100 million across the country with our state LCV partners across the country in winning elections up and down the ballot, from the president to local county commissioners and a lot in between. Let's talk about the presidential race for a second. So let's go to the next slide, which shows, it's a map you all have seen. At the end of the day, these are the half dozen most important states that'll help decide the election. And it's a map that's been pretty consistent for the last 18 months. And you'll know those three states at the top, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Those are the three states that Trump won by 77,000 votes that took him to victory. Those states are very much in play. The other three states that he won with a little more margin are also very much in play, and that's Arizona and Florida, which has always been a swing state, as people remember back to 2000, where Gore lost by 537 votes. And yes, North Carolina, also often the swing states. Those 6 key states will make the difference. The good news is, if the elections were held today, 4 weeks out, in all 6 of those states, Biden's ahead in the polls. And again, you can look at any one single poll, and that by itself won't tell you a lot. But what we do is we look at all the public polls and all the private polls that we have access to, and you average all those out. And literally in each of these 6 states, Biden's ahead. Probably by the most he's ahead would be Michigan, and sometimes in Pennsylvania. The narrowest one today is North Carolina. Florida, a couple points. North Carolina, maybe just a point. But the good, in all those 6 states, he's ahead. Now, of course, that means 28 days, no complacency. We're all in to try to make sure he wins. And the good news is, as we've seen in the last month, Trump's frankly had a bad couple of months in terms of politics and other things. More states are coming onto the map that weren't even there. So Ohio is now a toss-up. Iowa is close to a toss-up. So there's additional states coming on the map that they've got to defend. They thought they could be on offense in a place like Nevada or a place like Minnesota or even a place like New Hampshire, which Hillary won all 3 of those. They seem to be fading from reach for Trump, and he actually has to defend more turf. So it's a good news snapshot today, but as we said, there's a lot more to come. Let's go to the next. So that's play 1. So we need to win the White House and get rid of the most environmental president in history. But if we want to make progress on our policy priorities, again, politics are a strategy to win policy. We also need to have a pro-climate Senate. And you all know that. It's nice to have a president who cares about these issues, who will rejoin Paris, who can do stuff administratively on clean cars and clean power plant and the rest, and do much better than Obama did, because we're further along in the process now. But to really make the progress we need, we're going to keep a pro-climate House. I'm convinced of that for sure. We'll get to Steny later as a potential champion here, but it's going to stay in democratically controlled hands. Nancy Pelosi's a champ. Steny's been a champ, and we're going to actually, if anything, maybe pick up seats there. But the House is going to stay solid. the Senate is very much a jump ball. But you went back 9 months ago, I would say it would have been a 1 in 3 chance to flip the Senate. Right now, it's a 50-50, and maybe even slightly in the Democrats' favor. Again, they need a net gain of 3 states plus the White House to pick up, to have control, to get rid of Mitch McConnell as the leader. We're highly likely going to lose 1 Democratic seat. A great guy named Doug Jones, is a senator from Alabama. He won in a really tough off-year election against Roy Moore, a crazy opponent. This is now a more normal presidential year with a more normal candidate. It's going to be really hard for Doug Jones to keep that seat. We're helping him. We're all in. He's a great environmentalist, but it's going to be hard. So if you assume for a second he loses, then you need then you're down 4 seats. Therefore, you have to pick up 4 seats to win. So 2 seats that are the most likely to win are Colorado, John Hickenlooper, former governor, very likely to be the next senator, and Arizona, Mark Kelly, very likely to be the next senator there, beating Martha McSally, the second time she'll lose in 3 years. So those 2 seats look good. So then we're still down 2 seats. The other 4 seats in orange, North Carolina, Maine, Iowa, and Montana, are all at varying levels of toss-ups. Montana, Steve Bullock, great candidate, but it's a tough state. Iowa, Teresa Greenfield, really good candidate against Joni Ernst. Again, it's a tough state. Everyone knows Susan Collins, used to be an environmentalist. We support her in the past. She's basically gone south. Votes with Trump 90% of the time. Sarah Gideon's a great champion. North Carolina, complicated now because Cal Cunningham has had some, as people have probably seen, some personal challenges. He owned up to what he did, but it's obviously horrible in many ways. We're not sure how it's going to play out. But those are the 4 most likely. And then, but again, the map, just as the White House map has expanded, the Senate map has expanded. So it's possible, believe it or not, to win in a place like Alaska now. Like a place like Al Gross, a place in Kansas with Barbara Bollier, 2 seats up in Georgia, Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff, and even South Carolina, where Lindsey Graham is right in the center of the judiciary fight, and Jamie Harrison has done an amazing job raising all kinds of money, and that's a toss-up race. So the Senate map looks much better for the Democrats, but again, there's 4 weeks to go, a lot of work to go, a lot more work to do, and obviously North Carolina has become more challenging. We're not yet sure how it's going to play out. So bottom line is we have the decent chance to win the White House and to flip the Senate, but neither one is, so we have a lot more work to do. By the way, let me show you 2 ads real quickly that we've done, one presidential and one in a state, just to get a flavor for the conversation we're having with voters about our issues that we care so much about. So the presidential ad.
He denied the warnings of the coronavirus crisis.
This is their new hoax.
Ignored his medical experts, and we're suffering because of it. And Donald Trump ignored 97% of climate scientists, NASA, and the Department of Defense, who agree that climate change is real. Then put oil and coal lobbyists in charge of our environment. Trump even called climate change a hoax, too.
It's a hoax. It's a hoax.
Donald Trump's denial is costing us.
So that was an ad we ran in those 6 key presidential states aimed at a subset of swing voters who we knew by data cared about the environment. And then we ran this in, after COVID appeared, we were a little worried about it, but we showed it with a lot of research and data and testing, when you connect his denial of the coronavirus and his denial of the climate change crisis, light bulbs went off on people, and actually it was a very powerful ad. So we've been doing that a lot. Again, aimed at a subset of swing voters who care about the environment in those 6 states, an audience of 1.6 million people. We spent over $14 million in the last 3 months talking to those folks, a subset of folks in those 6 states. Very powerful message. We've done a lot of ads in some of the Senate races that I talked about in North Carolina, Maine, Montana, and Iowa in particular. Here's one of the most recent ones we just ran in the state of Iowa against Joni Ernst.
Here's a map of every single working oil well in Iowa. There aren't any. Here's Iowa Senator Joni Ernst. She voted to give big oil tax breaks totaling $25 billion. Here, Ernst has taken over $300,000 from the oil. Look again. Those tax breaks helped big oil, not Iowa's farmers or small businesses. And that's the thing. Joni Ernst doesn't understand who she works for. LCV.
sorry for a little buffering there, but you get the point of that ad. And again, our job is to make sure we communicate with voters and get them to vote for our candidates, but also try it when we know it's going to work, and then we test these things before we do it, to lean into our issues as part of the narrative, and also to to encourage the candidates to talk about issues as well. So just today, literally, Vice President Biden put out an ad in Michigan talking about cherry farmers and how they're being impacted by climate change. Because yes, we want to talk about our issues, but we want the candidates to do so. And we're seeing more and more in this cycle that the candidates themselves realize it's good, it's positive, it's okay to lean into our issues as part of the way to win, especially with young people, communities of color, and suburban women. We know these environmental issues resonate well, so we try to target those communities with these kinds of messages as one of the key paths to victory. The reason Nancy Pelosi is the speaker is because young people, people of color, and suburban women voted overwhelmingly for the Democrats in 2018 and helped flip over 40 seats. Those key audiences are really important for our messages in the presidential election. So let me say a couple more things and I'll stop. So as again, elections are a strategy to win policy. We're in good shape today, 28 days out, but we have a lot more work to do to win the White House, a lot more work to do to flip the Senate. We're obviously doing a lot of down ballot races in a lot of states, governor's races, state ledge races, county commissioners, you name it. But the big focus is on the presidency and the White House. And again, one of the things that gets we have to already start thinking about what if we actually, what if we win? What if this trifecta comes to pass? And you've got Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, and Chuck Schumer running the three branches, the three bodies, rather, to make sure we can make progress. And there's a lot of planning, a lot of conversations. Frankly, I've been doing this for over 40 years. More robust, more intense conversations to be ready this time if we have that chance to make progress. And I'm happy to report it's by far the best conversation, the most diverse conversation, not just with the traditional big green groups that we all work with, we're one of them, but labor groups, community groups, a big assortment of environmental justice groups that we've created a new alliance with called the Equitable and Just Climate Platform. So a lot more groups at the table helping to craft the policies, helping to build the political will to get the success. So it's going to take, if we have that trifecta, the oil and gas industry, they're not going to go away easy. We're going to need to do a lot of work both inside, but mostly outside the Beltway. But we've been putting together a much more robust, a much more diverse coalition of people. And new groups like the Sunrise Movement, just as another example. The Green New Deal Network, another example. All kinds of new voices at that table to make sure this time when we get the chance they will actually win the policies. And finally, I'll just stop with this. The good news is Biden's climate policy is the most aggressive climate policy by far of any presidential nominee in history. And again, that was crafted by, the traditional traditional big greens in part, but also our labor partners, also our environmental justice partners, other community group partners. So it was a much more robust process to help him get from a plan that was okay to a plan that's very powerful. And it embeds racial justice and equity at the center of that plan, which is the way it should be always. And it's actually now a much more central part of his plan as well, thanks to a lot of great work. So I'm going to pause there. I know we have plenty of time for questions, but Candace, back to you to start those questions off. But happy to have that. And let me just say, shout out again to the great work that Maryland LCV does. You've been a great partner. I've been on this job now for 15 years. I was in the board for another 10 years before that. Maryland LCV has always been a great partner. I'm looking forward to continuing that partnership as we go forward. As a much larger part, as Kim said, of the conservation voter movement in over 30 states around the country. But having a great partner here in Maryland is critical to our success. So thanks for that.
Jean, I love your enthusiasm. Thank you for that presentation. As you mentioned, we'll get into a few questions. I know some are coming in through the chat, and I will get to those. I'm going to get us started. Jean, Maryland is not one of the states that you mentioned in your remarks as a swing state. We were not one of your highlighted states on the map. And so please tell us why Maryland's role is important in this election and beyond.
Good. Yeah, and you're right. You're not a toss-up presidential state, but that's a good thing. I actually live in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It used to be on that map as a toss-up. It's now become a much more blue state. But what Maryland and Virginia and many other, and about at least a dozen other states around the country, are two really important things to know. One is the states are still the laboratories of democracy. that have to push forward the most aggressive policies so that eventually Congress wakes up, oh, wow, 30 states have passed a renewable portfolio. Let's do that federally. Or we've done this particular thing on this other piece of pollution. So the states are the laboratories. Maryland is one of the best positioned states in the country to do what you've been doing the last few years, which is pass the most aggressive state policies to then set a model for the rest of the country. So that's number one. And we work with our state LCV partners. You know, after the elections of 2018, we had between early 2019 and when COVID hit, frankly, we had more progress in the states, about a dozen states, than ever in the history of this country. And Maryland is one of those 12 states that said, we're going to push the envelope, be aggressive, be leaders, and let the rest of the country follow. So that's number one role. And that role will continue no matter what. Even if we lose it, if we lose at the federal level, it's going to continue. Or if we win, you're not going to stop doing your state policy. So that's critical to be a leader, and you're one of the best in the country to lead the way in your state. Having said that, you also happen to have some really important people who are part of the federal delegation. There's, like I said before, there's this guy named Steny. He's a really important person in the House leadership. He needs to hear from you on a regular basis. I've met with him, I don't even want to count how many times, dozens of times over the last 15 years. You know, at various kinds of meetings and events, and he's great. He shows up all the time. He likes to talk about these issues. He's gotten better and better, frankly, from my perspective, about leaning into them. But he still needs to hear from back home that this needs to be a top priority. It can't be 12th on the list. So I think he gets that. But you all in the state want to encourage him and pat him on the back and make sure this is on the short list, not the long list. So that's not, and he's such a important leadership role in Maryland. And then you have, two really important, Senate's a much smaller body. If we get to that, majority, it's going to be by a narrow margin. In fact, by the way, I hope I have to be careful how I say this, but we want to have more than a 50-50 Senate. We want to have 51, 52, 50. We don't want, I'll use an example, a guy named Senator Joe Manchin. He's a Democrat, but he's got the lowest LCV score of all the senators. We don't want him to be the one who decides what our climate policy is. So we want a little margin of error there to be able to be more aggressive in terms of what our climate policy can be. And Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen are the kind of people who they sit on key committees, whether it's the budget committee or the environment and public works committee. Those are the committees that are going to do a lot, or appropriations as well, actually. They're going to do a lot of the hard work. And they've worked on these issues. They know these issues. They're respected in the caucuses. So they're elevating their voices within the Senate caucuses is going to be a really important part. So Steny on the House side, I don't want to dismiss any other House members, but Steny in particular, he's a leader. He's not just a leader of your delegation, he's a leader of the entire Congress, and he's going to help bring along some of the ones who are a little concerned and a little soft. He can get them to the right place, and he's got to play that role, and you're going to help him do that. And then your two senators, they actually totally get this. They vote right almost all the time. They work on these issues, but just elevating their voices and pushing forward, that's another key role. So be a leader in your state, pushing the best policies, and make sure that Steny and Chris and Ben in particular are elevating their voices and making this a top priority.
And Jean, I want to follow up because another critical role for Maryland LCV is actually growing these legislators. I know we've got a number of elected officials on this call. Hello to friends. But we have, we work very closely with local and state elected officials to educate them, encourage them, and sometimes hold them accountable for votes that aren't right. And so by doing that, we're building stronger and stronger conservation leaders. Right. We then endorse them and they go on to the federal level. So the role we play here at the state level is actually really critical to growing our a strong Senate and House.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. Most of those folks came out of the state legislature, some previous thing, and building them up as champion. Because I say this all the time. One of the challenges we have we don't have enough people who are elected officials who wake up every day saying, "Whoa, look out!" Saying, I have to solve." That was pretty good. I have to solve the climate crisis. Right? There aren't enough legislators who see that as their core mission. One of their top three things that they're trying to solve every day. I think you have some people who do that, but the more you develop people at the state level to say, I'm a climate champion, I want to go to Congress to be a climate champion, that's just that. We need more of that. We do not have enough people who wake up every day wanting to be climate champions. And so the work you do at the state level helps elevate those voices for sure.
Great. I've got one more question, and then, like I said, we'll go to our Q&A. We mentioned earlier that equity issues are one of Maryland LCV's 3 E's: environment, elections, and equity. I know equity issues are equally important for LCV on the national level. Can you both speak to what you are hoping to see happen to advance these issues in 2021? Jean, we'll start with you, and Kim, please chime in as well on the important work that we're doing locally. Environmental justice and related challenges are certainly part of our strategic plan, and our DEIJ board committee is very active and committed to this work.
Thanks, and that's a really important question. I appreciate it, Candace. And we talk about it at 2 levels. One is as an organization, what we do internally and how we operate to make sure we center racial justice and equity in all our work, who we are, so that the organization literally looks more like America and does. So we've had an initiative over the last, and our strategic plan in the last cycle said, we have a deep commitment to racial justice and equity. And here's a few things you need to do. Number 1 is make sure our board is much more racially diverse. Make sure our staff is more racially diverse. So literally, we put numbers on. Over 40% of our staff are people of color now. That was not true 10 years ago by any means. So I think it has to be intentional. So that's on the internal, making sure our culture, our staff, our board are deeply committed to this and look like America in all the ways that that's important. But secondly, how we do our external work, who we partner with, who we put resources into. So we made a commitment in this election cycle, as we do partnerships in the elections, to make sure this is in the wake of the George Floyd murder in particular, invest in Black-led political groups. So we've put about $2 million of our resources into Black-led political groups in these key states, in Michigan, in North Carolina, in other states, to help support their work in partnership with us. So that's another piece. And ultimately, it's as you said earlier, Ken, about the policies. And as I said a little bit earlier, the Biden policy on climate centers racial justice and equity far more than it did a year and a half ago. And that's because a lot of us sat down with him and his team and brought the EJ voices forward to make sure they were at the table and had deep conversations. And we half a dozen of the national groups and about 12 of the leading EJ groups a year and a half ago had launched this equitable and just climate platform. It's a great process we had over the course of a year to come together on a set of principles. And then those voices together went to the Biden campaign. Hey, you have to adopt these principles and make your commitment, make your policies center racial justice and equity. So both internally and externally, we have to do this work to take it seriously with all the intentionality that's required, because that's both the morally right thing to do, it's a strategically smart thing to do, and just makes us a better organization in all the ways that makes sense in the moment we're in. So thanks for that, and thanks for Maryland LCV's leadership in that, and the deep commitment. It's so important. I know as board members and as staff, you all get this, and it's critical. So thanks on that.
Thank you. Kim, did you want to weigh in at all?
Yeah, I agree completely. And Jean is setting the stage for the state leagues in true leadership fashion on this. So we too are doing the internal work, as Candace said, through committees and boards. We're doing the external work through developing policies, definitely looking through a lens of justice and equity. We're raising our voices. Maryland LCV's got a really unique program called our CHISPA program, which means Spark. And it is focused on Latino population. And we've worked really closely with the population in the Langley Park area. When they got hit from COVID so hard, we generated a GoFundMe page and then got a grant from LCV, and we've brought in close to over $20,000 into that community to help them pay the rent, buy food, meet medical needs. And so not only are we working on policies and working on our internal selves, we're also trying to be good partners and neighbors throughout the state. So it's really a part of who we are every day.
John, that's great. And we started that CHISPA program nationally as an idea half a dozen years ago and said, let's invest in a few key states where that makes sense to start it. And some states in the Southwest like Colorado, Nevada, and Arizona, and then a couple of eastern states, and including Maryland, obviously. And you all have been great leaders in this. And like I said, it's the right thing to do, And it's such an important thing to do for so many reasons. They've done a great job in that. So we love the CHISPA program, and I'm very proud of all the great work that's been done. But there's a lot more to do.
Thanks. So we have a question from the audience. So Reed asks, Gene, some races are close but well-funded. Others are not well-funded but also not winnable. Which races have the greatest need and highest leverage for additional investment? Where should he give his money?
So I appreciate that, and it's a really good question, and we're asking ourselves that every day. And two things I want to say. One is money you give directly to candidates, right? And that's that's one piece of it. And so just so you know, folks, we have a website called Give Green, and if you're going to give money to a candidate directly, you should always go, as long as that candidate, this is for federal candidates and some state candidates, probably not Maryland ones this year, obviously, but in the future, go use the website Give Green to give the money. It still goes from you, Reed, to candidate X, but it comes through the Give Green portal, which basically tells the candidate you care about the environment. And we do that in conjunction with a group called Next Gen America, which is Tom Steyer's group, and NRDC Action Fund PAC. So if you're giving to candidates, use Give Green. We actually have a great event coming up on Thursday with Paul Simon, the artist, singer, who hardly ever does politics. He's actually doing an event for 7 senators, 7 senator wannabes, all of whom are on that list I mentioned earlier. So, and so that's just use Give Green. And to be particular on your question, some of these candidates are raising unbelievable amounts of money. In fact, Cal Cunningham just raised $28 million in the last quarter. We haven't even seen the numbers from Jamie Harrison and Sarah Gideon, but I'm confident they're going to be over 40 million, which is like record setting, right? And part of this, frankly, was in the wake of the untimely death of RBG. Money's been pouring out to support candidates. But so I think if I'm saying the candidates who there may be a little more of a long shot, but they're still positioned with the right resources and the right climate to win, that might be someone like Barbara Bollier in Kansas. That might be someone like Al Gross in Alaska. But it would also be, I'd say, Steve Bullock in Montana and Teresa Greenfield in Iowa. So those two of those are total toss-ups, Bullock and Greenfield. Two of those lean slightly Republican, but only slightly, Alaska and Kansas. But if I'm saying where's in terms of direct candidate dollar, they'll need it more than Sarah Gideon and Jamie Harrison, because their money is off the charts fundraising. And we're having the same question to ourselves: where do we spend our own independent money? But it's that same analysis. Where are the gaps that need to be spent? Not many people have played in Alaska. It's a little bit more of a sleeper race, but it has the potential on a good night to make a big deal. By the way, one more thing. I say good night. We don't yet know, obviously, whether we're going to know the results that night. In fact, if you're betting today, we may well not know that. But obviously, Trump's doing all he can to try to, claim that anything that anyone who votes by mail is a fraudulent vote, which we know is BS. So it's our job to make sure, because it may take a couple days, depending on how close it is, make sure every vote counts. They're going to try to stop the counting. They're going to try to get the courts in. They're going to intimidate election officials. But it's our job across the country to make sure every vote is counted as accurately, as quickly as it can. But that will be another way that we haven't anticipated that before. We saw it in Florida in 2000. That was a one moment that sticks in everyone's mind. But in general, usually on election night, you're going to know the results. That may not be true this time. So we're all gearing up for what ifs, or what do we do in those couple weeks if it's going to take that long to actually count all the votes. And it might if it's really close. But that's why for us, my main message is the bigger we win, the less likely there's going to be any mischief afterwards. So Florida will be an early reporting state. You saw that Mike Bloomberg just invested $100 million in Florida. If we can win Florida by a few points and have that called on election night, it could see a big night early on. But if not, and it could drag on for a couple weeks or more, and it could get really ugly. So we're all in to try to make it. So that was a long answer, Reed. But I tell you, use Give Green, and if you think about the Senate, Kansas, Alaska, Montana, and Iowa would be on my short list. Not to take anything away from any of the other candidates, but those would be my probably top 4 who have the most need in winnable races.
As you're submitting questions, I would be remiss if I did not remind you that none of the work and results can be achieved without your support. We invite you, and I personally invite you, to donate today to help ensure Maryland LCV can continue to support LCV's efforts here in Maryland. please go to our website, www.mdlcv.org, or you can donate right now by clicking the link in the chat. Thank you. I've got an interesting question that's come up for Jean. Can you tell us a bit about the process LCV took before endorsing Vice President Biden? What did you consider? Did you help drive his agenda?
Good. And by the way, thank you, and I will answer that. But let me just also second what you just said, Candace, which is for folks who are on this call, supporting Maryland LCV is probably the single most important thing you can do tonight. So don't delay, whether you do it right now or when we get off this call. But it's really, our state partners, as I said earlier, we can't win nationally unless our state partners are as effective and as strong as possible. So we hope you'll all be able to support in one way, shape, or form. And whatever you think about giving, do a little more, because it's just that important. So thanks for that. So Vice President Biden. So look, we by design stayed out of the primary. We had a campaign called Change the Climate 2020, which was geared towards making every candidate better on climate and create a competition among the candidates. As remember, there are 25 candidates running for president, right? So we stayed out of the primary, but we sat down with almost every candidate, with our board and with our senior staff, and said, what's your plan and how can it be better and how important is it to you? If you get elected, how important is it on day one? So we had that conversation in advance with almost all of the 25 candidates that were running, and each keynote there became this competition to see how good they were. We had a set of specific measures of, do you want to make sure we get to carbon free by no later than 2050? Do you want to, clean car standards, clean power plant, get back in Paris, don't take fossil fuel money, a set of criteria, right? We had a little checklist. You can see it on that chart. But then it became clear in March that Vice President Biden would be the nominee. And we had just pushed them all until that point. But once he was clear he's going to be the nominee, he said, okay, let's start having a more serious conversation. And we had a questionnaire that they all answered too. That's always part of our process, like it is in Maryland. But once it was clear Biden was going to be the nominee, said, okay, let's have a more intense, serious process. So we brought him into a lot of staff work on the side, and then brought him into a conversation with our board where he'd already had his questionnaire, and we basically said, it's okay, it's pretty good actually, but here's 5 ways it needs to be better. And what's it going to take? And here's with specific examples. And we want to be, and one of those was ground it more in environmental justice. Another word is making sure you invest in good labor jobs when you do it. Another was invest more in your big investment plan. Make it a much bigger plan. And another was be specific on your interim targets. You said 2050, that's fine for out there, but what are you gonna do in 2030? So over the course of those conversations, he made some commitments to us about things where he would improve the plan. And then we actually worked with a set of other allies, from the Sierra Club to the Sunrise Movement to 350 to a couple of the other, several NRD and other NRDC and others, to keep working him to make sure that the plan, and he make sure he sat down with other groups as well to make sure the plan got better. So we actually wound up endorsing just before Earth Day in April, but through that process, we had a conversation with him directly, dozens of conversations with staff to make sure the plan got better. And we made sure he talked to some of those other groups, like the environmental justice groups, like the Sunrise Movement, like some of the labor folks, to make sure that the plan got better and better and better. So over the course of the next 4 months, 5 months actually, group by group by group, then endorsed him and kept having these intense conversations. But it was the most intense process we've ever had, inclusive both within our own organization, but with the larger movement in many different ways, as I said, so that the plan today, and the good news is it's not just something on his website, it's actually something he talks about. Like I said, he just ran an ad, a climate ad today, but if you saw him speak at the convention, he talks about 4 crises that we're facing today as a country, and it's the economic crisis, it's the COVID crisis, it's the racial justice crisis, and it's the climate crisis. And that's part of his story. And they're all connected. Solving the economic crisis can help solve the racial justice crisis, can help solve the climate crisis. They're connected. And so that kind of the way he talks about it is way more powerful. And we've done a lot of fundraisers with him where we bring our donors and in each of those conversations, he's talking about climate. So he gets better and better and better. So when he got thrown a softball last week, at least he had a much more robust answer than he had 9 months ago. That's just because he's just been, working it through and getting better at it. It could still be better. But there was a lot of deep work with him and his team to get him to this much, much better place than he was. Again, it was an okay plan, but this is much deeper, much more serious, and it's much more of a priority for him than it was when he started the campaign. So both parts of that, better policy and a higher priority, so that we're increasingly confident. He's got to pick good people to run his agencies and the rest, but we're increasingly confident that he gets this, and he's going to be something he definitely leans into. And if you look at his main mantra is build back better. Like that's just, his frame is build back better, which basically means a massive investment program. And centered in that is investing in clean energy. That's the clean energy revolution. And I think it's 40% of the money in communities of color as part of that investment. So it's definitely a much deeper, better plan as a result of those conversations. He has one line, I've seen him use it many times. He says, when Trump thinks of climate change, he thinks hoax. When I think of climate change, I think jobs. And that just, that kind of captures the mindset of his economic plan is embedded in solving the climate crisis and investing in communities of color. So it's pretty damn good. And I wouldn't have said that with as much enthusiasm, frankly, 9 months ago. Like I said, it was okay, but it wasn't as good, and he wasn't as good, and it wasn't as central. So all that's been good. So thanks for that.
You both go into some specifics about what you'd like to see on the federal and Maryland state level with regards to climate change in 2021. Anything specific related to clean transportation policy?
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually if we look at hours that the Maryland LCV staff is working each day, a lot of it's going into this question right now. We're gearing up for the 2021 legislative session, and our top priority is climate change bills and justice as they come together. And when I say justice, I want to follow up on Jean's point, and I guess Vice President Biden's. That means jobs as well, right? We can't address climate change without addressing the impacts on equity and justice and jobs and communities. So all of that is one thing when we talk about climate change. Specifically, some of the things that we're looking at for 2021, and these are ideas that are still gelling. We're working with legislators and partners, but we're very interested in reducing and addressing the transit funding gap in Maryland. Transit is a really important equity issue. There's a $2 billion funding gap between what they have and what is needed to just maintain and operate these buses, let alone improve them, right? We feel that's very important. We were on the front lines of fighting the governor's most recent proposal to cut back on transit, and I'm really happy to say that along with our partner groups, we won that fight. He's withdrawn that proposal because of the outrage of it. And so that was something we've been working on immediately. Making our bus and transit system zero emission. And we have a goal of trying to start, I believe it's in 2024, every new bus that's purchased, let's make it zero emission. And it's crazy not to. So that's a piece of legislation that we're interested in advancing. And there's a regional program called the Transportation Climate Initiative, and it's fairly technical, which I won't go into right now, but the main point is that Maryland needs to lead on this initiative. We need to be out there and in front, driving the other states. Jean talked about the importance of this state as a leader. This is a perfect opportunity. We're putting a lot of pressure on the governor, hoping the General Assembly steps up and helps us really push that. It would bring some funds in for transportation. And let me also just mention the whole zero emission vehicles for cars as well. Building that infrastructure is really critical. We want an eye on equity in that as well. But yeah, that's our transportation platform right now for 2021.
That's great. You can get that all done with responsive champions. So 3 quick things. One is that Obama did this when he first came in. My board chair is Carol Browner. She was the climate czar for Obama, and they helped make sure within the first week they started a process they can use with the executive branch to make sure you increase the fuel economy standards and to get more aggressive standards. Trump has actually tried to stop that. He's also tried to stop California from going even beyond. California is still going full speed ahead. They're in court about whether they're right to do that. But a new administrator, EPA and Department of Transportation together can just do that on their own and put these much more aggressive transportation, fuel economy standards in place, following what California, I think, just set new ones. Again, they're in court to challenge it. I think they're going to get to all new cars sold by all electric, I think by 2030 or 35. So really aggressive. Feds have to follow. So that's one piece, executive. Secondly, the government is a huge purchaser. And they can use their purchasing policy to buy fleets, to buy all the ways you can actually use your purchasing policy to make sure you're just creating a market for that. And then the third piece is the legislative piece. And again, in our mind, the most likely first play to help solve the climate crisis is this big economic recovery package. Build Back Better, but embedded in that is a lot of investment in transportation. And that's everything from the charging stations that we need many, many more of, to the mass transit, to the clean buses. As Kim was saying, there's a whole suite of investments in the transportation sector as well as other sectors to just get us in a new path. So EPA and DOT doing the fuel economy standards and greenhouse gas emissions from cars, federal procurement policies, and then a massive investment through this massive bill that we need to pass right out of the box to help the economy recover. But that includes charging stations, mass transit, clean buses, and the rest. So a lot of opportunities. Really excited about it.
And if I can just add one detail is that in Maryland, transportation is the leading source of greenhouse gas emissions, right? So it's our big hurdle to meet. So that's why this organization is very focused on the transportation sector, and we're definitely at the table on it.
Thank you both. We've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to ask one more question that came from the audience before I give you time to give some closing remarks. And that question was from Sam, and it is, what are the most likely post-election challenges to Biden's election? Being optimistic there.
Well, you can speculate. If you've read the Bart Gellman piece in The Atlantic, you can read the potential horror shows of things that could happen, literally as extreme as the guy not willing to leave even after results are clear. So I don't like to spend too much time on that part of it, because like I said, the most important thing for me is the bigger the win on election day, the less there's any of this challenges afterwards. But they are there, if that's what you're getting at. And so I think, I think if it's close or even reasonably close, we're not going to know the results. Kyrsten Sinema wasn't chosen to be, wasn't clearly the winner in the Arizona Senate race in 2018 until the Monday after the Tuesday. It took 6 days. Mark Kelly's ahead by more than she was, so maybe he wins in the first day or two, but maybe not. Many of these Senate races could be very close, as could the presidential, as we saw in 2016, as we saw in 2008. So the biggest challenge is making sure, and this is going to be a suite of lawyers on the one hand, poll watchers on the second hand, and frankly, people in the streets on the third hand, to make sure in this window of time where not all the votes have yet been counted, the story's got to be the same. Make sure every vote counts. Litigation, organizing, working with local elected officials in all those levels. So I think that's the biggest challenge. And if you heard about these, some ballots will be rejected. There's this process called ballot curing, something that we haven't done much of. We actually go back and tell people, hey, by the way, your signature didn't match, but you can go back and fix that. So you can voter by voter by voter in these key states, going back and trying to fix some of those ballots. You can do state by state, the rules are different, but that's the fundamental challenge. The fundamental goal is to make sure every vote is counted as quickly as possible. Fraud, this is not a serious issue. It's just a smokescreen to try to, frankly, to try to steal the election that he probably can't win otherwise. And we just can't let that happen. And all those strategies, media strategy, litigation strategy, organizing strategy, working local officials, all those things need to happen. And that, to me, is a challenge that we may not have if we win big, but it's the one people need to be prepared for, and be prepared for not having a winner on November 3rd. Again, TBD, but it's certainly a scenario that we all are talking a lot about.
I know I said that was going to be the last question, but one came in that was, amazing. And so I'll ask you to just loop this into your final remarks. And that is, with so much negativity in our state and our nation, I'd like to end with asking a positive question. What gives you hope? And if you could tie that into your remarks, that'd be fantastic.
Good, Kim, you want to go first or you want to close?
You go ahead.
Okay, so look, I talk specifically about the elections and how they're positioned to, but there's a lot more work to do. But I think that in terms of solving the climate crisis, a couple things. One is that, and I didn't share the point, but the data is clear that in the wake of the worst storms and wildfires and floods and the rest, the public demand for action is getting higher and higher, which is a good thing. But even more importantly, the parts of the electorate that have tended to be either non-participant or aggressively excluded and voters suppressed would be young people and people of color. That's the future. They care the most intensely. And if we can get them to participate, we'll have not just won the elections, but won it with the strong voices of people who historically have participated less, historically have tried to been shut out. But if we can get those voices in, we know they care most deeply about the climate crisis, and that's the political will that we're building to make the progress we need to make. So having those voices in the process, they care the most. They want, data suggests that, and that would happen in 2018, they want to participate more than ever before. If we can make sure that happens, that's the most hopeful thing for the future from my perspective.
Kim?
I think I have a similar sense of things. I've been doing this work for a long time, and I remember vividly being involved in elections when the environment you were hoping maybe got one line in a debate or one line in a press announcement. It was usually somewhere between a 6 and a 10 as a priority issue. And, this year it's one of the top 4, probably because of the crisis. But, the debate, it was astounding to me that there was that much time spent on climate. We can talk about the quality of the answers later, but there's still the dialogue, the awareness, the understanding, and the commitment from citizenry there's a lot there to be hopeful about. We're not debating about if it's real anymore. And that is very, very encouraging to me. And I just in the last minutes, I want to really very sincerely thank Candace. She's a fabulous board member. We're very fortunate to have her. She has a podcast, so track her down. And she's been a great partner. And thank you, Candace. Really great to do this work with you. I started out saying there's nothing more important right now than this nexus of politics and the environment. And I think Jean has just eloquently pointed that out. It is really a critical place for us to be working. And if there's anything that's ringing true for me, it is that elections matter, right? We are living the result of elections matter. The other thing we're living through is the fact that votes matter. And we have a great voter education and voter outreach program. I think it's been in the chat. Track it down if you have any questions about your voting, but vote. It's critical, and it really, really matters. And I'll be honest, my friends, donations matter. We had to cancel our awards dinner, which brings in about 1/3 of our revenue this year because of COVID. And so we need your help. We need you to be our partner in this work. And it's really important in Maryland for us to be out there and growing our legislators and the issues and getting ready for our elections in 2022. So go to our website, make a donation, make it a little bit higher than you really want to because it matters. And thank you so much for being a part of today. And I want to close by giving Jean a sincere, deep gratitude for not only being here, but for truly doing the great work. And on behalf of all of us in Maryland that truly care about the environment, keep up the great work.
You all too. Thank you all. Great to be here. Make sure you support Maryland LCV. Thanks, folks.
We appreciate you joining us this evening for this important conversation. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Kim. We know this election is critical for our nation. Please, please, please support our work and please vote. Thank you all.